Warning, this content may be disturbing to some audiences. Subscribe. If you dare.
We fed them and packed them goodie bags full of aspirin and hand sanitizer, then drove them to the next state. Hey everybody, welcome to ANECDOSED. People ask Reddit. Have you ever picked up a hitchhiker?
Number 1.
I've picked up numerous hitchhikers, but one in particular stands out. His name was Garth. Garth was a hell of dude with a hell of a story. This is the encounter between my friends and Garth. After graduating high school, myself and 4 friends decided to take a long road trip over the summer, and Glacier National Park was our mecca for the trip. We found ourselves camping in the middle of nowhere in the woods of northwest Montana, some 25 miles north of Missoula. We camped illegally and got drunk and stoned and pretty much stayed up all night. In the morning, I woke up in the driver's seat of my car to see some dude walking by on the road, which was 40 yards away from our campsite. The guy walking couldn't see us just passing by, but I could see him. I was still half drunk, so I decided to yell at him, not even thinking that it could be the owner of the land that we were illegally camping on. He did a 180 and stared straight at me and began walking towards me. He had a single backpack, a big tree limb for a walking stick, and looked exhausted and hungry. He looked like the Big Lebowski mixed with Saul from Pineapple Express, but acted like someone who had just had their ass kicked, mentally and physically. He looked like someone had sucked his soul out of him. My friends had heard me yelling for him, so they had stirred awake to find to their surprise, Garth sitting in one of our lawn chairs eating our stale Doritos like he hadn't eaten anything in days. We would later learn that was actually true. It was about 10 a.m. by the time we decided to leave the campsite and head back to Missoula to find food. Garth hopped in the car and began to tell his story of how he ended up in the middle of nowhere, Montana, shotgun, and talked while my friend sat behind him, ready for Garth to try to kill us or something crazy. The story that Garth told us was effing crazy. It basically went something like this. Some dude he met in Missoula promised him some work on his land. Apparently, the guy bought some land and needed some trees and brush cleared so he could start building a house. He said he would let Garth stay on his land for the night and meet him there in the morning with some tools and some food so they could work all day to clear this brush. Well, one day went by, then another and another and another. The guy never showed up, and Garth was on this guy's land for 5 effing days with no food or shelter. He luckily had a stream of water on his land that Garth drank to keep hydrated, but catching food was next to impossible. He said he could hear coyotes very close to him at night, and one morning he woke up to a bull moose 30 yards away, snorting and stomping its hooves on the ground, ready to charge. Garth ran up a tree and stayed there for the rest of the day. He said he didn't want to leave the land because he had no idea where he was, and he was hoping that the guy would show up to take him back to town. It wasn't until this particular morning that he said he was so hungry and cold that he thought he was going to die if he didn't start walking somewhere. Garth said he started following a logging road with the hope it would lead him somewhere. He had been walking all night with no signs of anything. He actually thought he was walking in circles. He said that the coyotes were howling and he was the most scared he had ever been in his life. We were the first sign of people he had seen in almost 6 days. After telling us this story, we were told we wanted to buy him lunch and some beers and a coat. He immediately declined. He seemed embarrassed by the situation, especially because some 18-year-olds were going to buy him this stuff. We understood where he was coming from, but this guy just had 6 days of hell in the woods and he deserved a hot meal. He finally said he would eat lunch with us, so we took him to a Chinese buffet where he ate down 4 fat plates. Like a boss. After lunch he asked us to take him to the homeless shelter in town so he could get a shower and get a bed for the night. We agreed and took him across town to drop him off. The car ride over was quiet, mainly because Garth dozed off, probably from his exhaustion. He was still sleeping when we got to the homeless shelter. We woke him up and he thanked us a million times and stumbled into the shelter. My friends and I were floored by his story. We didn't say much as we hit the road north to Glacier National Park, until we noticed something on the floor by the front seat. His effing backpack. We were 40 miles north of town and didn't even think about what to do. We pulled over and turned around to take his backpack to him at the shelter. We contemplated opening it for a good 15 minutes. We thought it would be wrong and that we wouldn't want someone to do that to our pack. But our curiosity got the best of us and we decided to open it. Garth was too epic to not find out what he had in there to aid in his wilderness adventure. We joked about what would be in there: a bloody knife, a head, some sort of body part. What we found was truly unbelievable. We found out that Garth was bipolar and diabetic based on his medications. He had some oral glucose gel to combat his low blood sugar, a blood sugar machine and Zoloft antidepressant. It blew my mind that this man, a diabetic, would even think about staying in the woods for this long while knowing he was a diabetic. We also found a notebook that had some sketches and writings, mainly about his travels around the Pacific Northwest. I wanted to read more, but we had reached the shelter to return his pack. Garth was a effing man if I had ever met one. We thought he could use a little help, so we put $100 in his pack before we gave it back to him. He was inside sitting at a table when we arrived with his pack. I held out the pack and just said, "I think you forgot something, man." He stood up and ran over to me, grabbed it, and then gave me a huge bear hug and started crying. He told me, while he was hugging me, that he thought that he had just lost everything he owned after we dropped him off. It was weird, but I felt like I had to hug him back, so I did. He followed us back out to our car and thanked us again and offered us a cup of coffee. We declined and said we had to be on our way to get there before dark. He understood and even offered to take a look at our car's oil and other stuff before we headed out. We said no, said goodbye, and drove off to the corner. We were stuck at a traffic light, and I could still see him in the rearview mirror, probably 50 to 60 yards behind us. He knelt down to dig through his backpack. He took out his glucometer, his notebook, and then the $100 we had put in there. He saw it and started running after us, either to thank us or to try to give it back. The light turned green and we drove off before he got to us. I stood out the car window and gave him a wave and a peace sign. He responded with a salute and the biggest smile I've ever seen. We drove off and we never saw him again. This was our encounter with Garth, the world's manliest hobo. Wherever you are, Garth, Godspeed, my good man.
Number 2.
My husband and I were leaving the grocery store and witnessed a big dramatic mulch theft. Yes, someone grabbed a bag of mulch, tossed it in their Jeep and sped off, tires squealing, jumping curbs. It was confusing and hilarious. The high school clerks were mostly indifferent, but there were a couple employees freaking out and running after the Jeep. Then we turn around and there is this girl standing there with her jaw hanging open and holding a box of donuts. She just looks at us and says/demands I need a ride. I don't know why he just did that. That's my cousin. The employees who were freaking out kind of turn and start coming toward her now that the Jeep is gone. So we were like, okay, let's go. She lived like 2 miles away in the mobile home park. Sure enough, the Jeep was parked in the drive. For some reason her cousin just totally ditched her for a $4 bag of mulch.
Number 3.
Me and my dad always pick up hitchhikers, always have and always will. We decided we were going to drive down to El Paso, from Salt Lake City, to see Tom Waits live, so obviously in the spirit of things, we were going to grab everybody we could. On the way we saw 2 ex-young punk kids outside of Phoenix, so we grabbed them. Turns out they're on their way to stand outside the concert hall that Tom Waits was playing at. This made us feel awesome. The second set of people were 2 ex-people who lived in the boondocks of nowhere. I believe they were 90 plus and all they were doing was getting groceries. One of them was in World War II, and they seemed happy as shit just baking in the sun waiting for a ride. This made us feel awesome. The third was a Hispanic dude in a broken down vehicle with 2 other Mexican dudes. He made the motions and implied it just ran out of gas. We're in the boondocks still, nothing around for effing miles. We take him all the way to the gas station and buy him a thing and a gallon of gas, and as soon as my dad hands it over he goes through his broken English and says thanks yous and whatnot. Then the mother effer just starts walking back towards his car like a champ. I'd say how far it was, but I'm not good with distance, and there's no way I would walk the distance in the hot sun. So we grabbed him and shuffled his ass back to the car and gave him a ride back to his car. I think it was about a 15-minute drive on the freeway. When we finally drop him off, and I'll never not hear this in my head when I think about it, he said in the best English that he knew thank you. I love you. Best road trip of my life.
Number 4.
I've picked up plenty of hitchhikers in my life. One I remember was a 28-ish-year-old guy who was trying to get to Madison to be a test subject for a new ad medication. Apparently they lock you up for a couple months, regulate your diet and exercise, then give you a few grand and set you free. You know, if the meds they're testing don't kill you. Anyway, I got him another 50 miles down the road before I had to turn south. He was nice though. This past June, right before our wedding, my now ex-husband picked up 3 crusty kids and their dog. They were hitching their way to a rainbow gathering, so he brought them home to me. We fed them and packed them goodie bags full of aspirin and hand sanitizer, along with 10 pounds of dog food, then drove them to the next state. They were a nice bunch of kids. I've also not picked up hitchhikers who I thought were suspect, but I usually go to the nearest gas station and put together a bag of water, Gatorade and granola bars and bring it to them. Even if I think they look creepy, I still don't want them to go hungry.
Number 5.
I was dropping a friend off at the airport, and some middle-aged guy with luggage came up to my car and asked for money for a taxi to where his hotel was. He kind of didn't know the city's geography, and a taxi would have cost around $80. He didn't look too happy when I told him that, and explained that he had just flown in from a job interview in Detroit, and was in town for another job interview the following day. After hemming and hawing, I let him jump in, and drove him the 40 miles to his hotel. He was apparently an engineer, who, I kid you not, worked on rockets, the space shuttle, and other various flying things. He said he was on his last, and these job interviews were the last bit of hope for him. We just talked the whole time about his previous jobs, and various 3D rendering software technology. It was my first time picking up a hitchhiker, and he wasn't creepy at all. Make sure to share your personal story in the comments below and have the opportunity to be featured in a future video. Also, if you like these topics, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification button to continue seeing more content like this every day. See you next time.